After years of fretting over coming shortages, the country is actually facing a dwindling number of young people entering engineering and technology-related fields. The decline is growing so drastic that industry has begun advertising campaigns intended to make engineering look sexy and cool. And companies are slowly starting to import foreign workers or sending jobs to where the engineers are in Vietnam and India. It was engineering prowess that lifted this nation from post-war defeat to economic superpower. But according to educators, executives, and young Japanese themselves, the young here are behaving more like Americans, choosing better-paying fields like finance and medicine, or more purely creative careers like the arts, rather than following their salaryman fathers into the unglamorous world of manufacturing. The problem did not catch Japan by surprise. The first signs of declining interest among the young in science and engineering appeared almost 2 decades ago, after Japan reached first-world living standards. And in recent years, there has been a steady decline in the number of science and engineering students. But only now are Japanese companies starting to feel the real pinch. By one Ministry of International Affairs estimate, the digital technology industry here is already short almost 500,000 engineers. Headhunters have begun poaching engineers mid-career with fat signing bonuses, a predatory practice once unheard of in Japan's less cutthroat version of capitalism. The problem is likely to worsen because Japan has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. Japan is sitting on a demographic time bomb, said Kazuhiro Asakawa, a professor of business at Keio University. An explosion is going to take place. They see it coming, but no one is doing enough about it.
The growth of the modern state brought with it the development of mass political parties and the emergence of professional politicians. A man whose occupation is the struggle for political power may go about it in 2 ways. First, a person who relies on their political activities to supply their main source of income is said to live off politics, while a person who engages in full-time political activities but who doesn't receive an income from it is said to live for politics. Now, a political system in which recruitment to positions of power is filled by those who live for politics is necessarily drawn from a property-owning elite who are not usually entrepreneurs. However, this is not to imply that such politicians will necessarily pursue policies which are wholly biased towards the interests of the class they originate from. It isn't necessary to have a specialized knowledge of, say, the intricacies of counterpoint, or even to be able to read music to understand it. Usually getting the point of a piece of music, its emotional and dramatic impact, is immediate or simply requires you to become more familiar with it. Of course, prolonged study of music and its composition, as in any other field, will increase your understanding, but not necessarily your enjoyment. Now, I realize that it can require a good deal of willingness on our part to risk new sensations, and there is a lot of music that will seem unfamiliar and alien to you on a first hearing.
Before farming was introduced into Scotland, people lived by hunting, fishing, and gathering wild foodstuffs. This way of life meant that they usually didn't settle permanently in one place, but were to an extent nomadic, moving about in search of a livelihood, perhaps returning to the same places at certain times of the year. It is believed that the islands of Orkney were known to these people, but so far only a few flint tools have been found to verify this. This is because coastal erosion has destroyed many ancient sites, and these may have contained relics of some of these earliest pioneering colonists.
Paper was first manufactured in Europe by the Spanish in the 12th century, although it had been imported since the 10th century. Around the year 1276, a mill was established at Fabriano in Italy. The town became a major centre for paper making and throughout the 14th century provided most of Europe with fine quality paper, which it has continued to produce ever since. By the 15th century, paper was also being manufactured in Germany and France, and it was not long before both countries became almost completely independent of material bought overseas. With the increasing availability of paper in Europe, the production of identical printed pictures became almost inevitable.
The spinal cord, the link between the brain and the body, is a band of nervous tissue about the thickness of your little finger that runs through the backbone. Nerve cells, called motor neurons, convey electric impulses that travel from the brain to the spinal cord, branching off at the appropriate point and passing to the various parts of the body. Similarly, sensory neurons transmit messages from organs and tissues via the spinal cord to the brain. But the spinal cord also functions without the brain having to intervene. It alone controls those actions called spinal reflexes that need to be carried out very fast in response to danger. There have been many studies in America of the opinions and behavior of university lecturers and professors, and of well-known free or public thinkers who are not attached to a university or other institution, which show that those who are recognized as being more successful or productive as scholars in their field, or are at the best universities, are much more likely to have critical opinions. That is to say, that they are more likely to hold liberal views, in the American use of that word, than those of their colleagues who are less creative or who have less of a reputation. The better a university is, as measured by the test results of its students or by the prestige of its staff, the more likely it has been that there will be student unrest and a relatively left-of-center faculty.
However simple or complex the chain of events in any given situation, when looked into, it usually reveals a train of causal relationships. They are seen to be linked in some way. The methods of analysis aim to establish these relationships and provide a solid background for useful generalizations based on what at first appear to be separate events. The first step in this process is to collect facts and then see if any particular patterns emerge. If they do, it then becomes possible to form theories related to the facts, and this type of empirical theory forms a useful basis for analysis and prediction. However, on its own, this theory is not enough. The essential second step is to test it by collecting more facts and by checking predictions against events. These new facts may mean you have to modify the theory, bearing in mind that new facts can only either disprove or support a theory. They cannot prove it to be right.
It is difficult to know how to place Montesquieu if you're the kind of person who likes to categorize: historian, political philosopher, sociologist, jurist, or, if you think the Persian letters a novel, a novelist. He was all these things. Perhaps, as some have, he could be placed among that almost extinct species, the man of letters. The books that make up the spirit of the laws have had the most influence on later thinkers, and in them, as in his equally great Considerations on the Causes of the Grandeur and Decadence of the Romans, he makes his underlying purpose clear. It is to make the random, apparently meaningless variety of events understandable. He wanted to find out what the historical truth was. His starting point, then, was this almost endless variety of morals, customs, ideas, laws and institutions, and to make some sense out of them. He believed it was not chance that ruled the world, and that beyond the chaos of accidents, there must be underlying causes that account for the apparent madness of things. Privacy and the right to privacy are increasingly becoming hot topics in the media, which is a touch ironic given that it is often the media that is responsible for invasion of privacy. This is not just about those whose careers put them in the public eye, but ordinary people who, through no fault of their own, have come to public notice because of some event that has attracted the attention of the media. It might be that a member of their family has been imprisoned for some crime, rightfully or wrongfully, or perhaps they're the victims of some natural disaster. Some people argue that those who have chosen to be in the public sphere and have teams of public relations people to make sure they get as much public attention as possible, actors, rock stars, politicians and the like, have given up their right to privacy and get everything they deserve.